You're listening to What to Listen To, the podcast that answers the question you didn't even know you were asking. From fascinating deep dives to thought-provoking trends, we've got your ears covered, so sit back, plug in, and let's explore what's worth your time today.
Welcome back to What to Listen To, the podcast that helps you cut through the noise and get right to the heart of what matters.
Yeah, always an adventure to see what we're going to find in these deep dives.
That's right, and today's deep dive promises to be a real eye-opener. But first, a quick shout-out to our sponsor, Campus Fit. They make custom clothing for your school, so whether you're looking for the perfect game day gear or just want to rep your alma mater in style, check them out at campusfit.store.
I'm going to have to get some new shirts for my kids from there.
Absolutely. And of course, we have to give a huge thanks to our incredible producers, Scott Manthe and Ariel Turner from SMAT Designs. They're the masterminds behind finding these fascinating topics for us, and their research is top-notch.
Yeah, they really dig up some amazing stories.
They do. You can reach out to them at smatdesigns.com if you have any topic suggestions or just want to give them a virtual high five for their hard work. Okay, enough with the pleasantries. Let's get down to business. Today, we're going to journey back in time to the late 19th and early 20th centuries.
A time when horses were the kings of the road, literally.
Exactly. And as you might imagine, a world reliant on horse-drawn transportation came with some, shall we say, unique challenges.
Challenges that might seem almost unbelievable from our modern perspective.
So picture this. It's the turn of the 20th century. And cities like New York and London are these bustling hubs of commerce and culture.
Growing at an incredible pace, fueled by the Industrial Revolution.
But here's the catch. The primary mode of transportation is the horse. And we're not talking about a handful of horses here and there. We're talking over 100,000 horses in New York City alone.
Wow. Think about the logistics of that for a moment. It wasn't just about moving people. It was about moving goods, delivering supplies. Horses were the backbone of the entire urban ecosystem.
It's hard to even fathom the sheer scale of it, isn't it? So we've got all these horses and they're doing the heavy lifting, literally. But there's a rather pungent downside.
Let's just say that those city streets weren't exactly known for their fresh air.
Each horse was producing an astounding amount of waste. We're talking 15 to 35 pounds of manure and up to 2 gallons of urine every single day. Multiply that by tens of thousands of horses. And you can start to imagine the problem.
It wasn't just a matter of odor, though. This was a serious public health crisis in the making.
Yeah, we often think of sanitation as like a modern concern, but facing literal mountains of waste in the streets, you can imagine the kinds of health hazards they were dealing with back then.
It's mind-boggling to think about. What kind of diseases were they facing?
Well, the manure itself wasn't the only problem. It attracted swarms of flies, which, as you can imagine, spread diseases like typhoid and cholera. Things we barely think about today could be deadly back then.
It's a stark reminder of how far we've come in terms of public health and sanitation.
It really is. And the thing is, they knew it was a problem. They weren't just ignoring it. In fact, the situation got so bad that in 1898, they held the first International Urban Planning Conference. And guess what was at the very top of their agenda?
I'm going to guess it had something to do with horse manure. You got it. The Great Horse Manure Crisis, as it came to be known, was a global concern. Cities all over the world were struggling with this issue. And to give you an idea of just how dire they thought the situation was, the Times of London actually published an article predicting that by 1950, London would be buried under 9 feet of manure if they didn't find a solution.
9 feet? That's almost the height of a basketball hoop.
So what did they do? Surely they didn't just sit back and wait for the manure to engulf them.
No, of course not. They tried everything they could think of. Some cities started experimenting with electric streetcars and cable cars as alternatives to horse-drawn transportation. Bicycles became incredibly popular, and there were even early attempts at developing electric cars.
So they were already thinking about moving away from horses even back then. To some extent, yes, but these early alternatives had their limitations. Electric cars were still in their infancy and quite expensive. Public transportation systems were being developed, but couldn't yet handle the sheer volume of passengers. And of course, you had all those people whose livelihoods depended on horses, carriage makers, stable owners, high suppliers. They weren't exactly thrilled about the prospect of a horseless world.
It's interesting how resistance to change is such a constant throughout history. But even with all these efforts, it sounds like the horse manure problem was reaching a tipping point. What was the turning point? When did things start to shift?
Well, while cities were desperately trying to manage the mountains of manure, A new invention was quietly gaining traction. The automobile.
Ah, yes. The rise of the car. It's almost poetic in a way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Out of the ashes of the horse manure crisis rose this new, seemingly revolutionary mode of transportation.
It certainly seemed like the answer to their prayers at the time. No more mountains of manure, faster travel times, the ability to travel greater distances. It's easy to see why the automobile captured people's imaginations.
And of course, you had brilliant minds like Carl Benz and Henry Ford pushing the boundaries of what was possible with these gasoline-powered machines. But I imagine there was still some skepticism. Not everyone was immediately on board with the idea of horseless carriages, right?
Absolutely. Early automobiles were often seen as unreliable, noisy, and even dangerous. And let's not forget, they were initially quite expensive, so only the wealthy could afford them.
So it wasn't an overnight revolution, it was a gradual transition, with the automobile slowly but surely gaining ground over horse-drawn transportation.
Exactly. By the 1910s and 1920s, the shift became undeniable. Cars were becoming more affordable, more reliable, and more widely available. And as their numbers grew, the mountains of manure began to fade into a rather unpleasant memory.
And with that, the world embarked on a new era, the era of the automobile. But of course, as with any major technological shift, there were unforeseen consequences.
And those consequences are what make this story so relevant to us today. Because while the automobile solved the immediate problem of horse manure, it inadvertently created a whole new set of challenges that we're still grappling with in the 21st century.
Yeah, it's fascinating how, like, a solution to one problem can sometimes create a ripple effect, leading to new and unexpected challenges. Makes you wonder if there are any parallels to our world today.
Oh, absolutely. I think that's a great point. We often get so caught up in the excitement of new technologies and innovations that we don't always stop to consider the potential downsides.
So if the automobile was a solution to the horse manure crisis, what were the unintended consequences that came with it? What new problems did it create?
Well, for starters, the automobile's reliance on fossil fuels brought with it a whole new type of pollution, air pollution. As more and more cars hit the roads, cities that had just started to breathe a sigh of relief after the horse manure crisis were suddenly choking on smog.
That's ironic, isn't it? They traded one environmental problem for another.
Precisely. And then there's the issue of oil dependence. The automobile's insatiable thirst for fossil fuels has led to conflicts, wars, and geopolitical tensions that continue to this day.
We're still dealing with the ramifications of that reliance on oil. It's a problem that seems to touch so many aspects of our lives.
It really does. And of course, we can't forget about the biggest challenge of all, climate change. The burning of fossil fuels is a major contributor to global warming, and that's a threat that impacts every single one of us.
It's almost like we swapped one crisis for an even bigger one. It makes you wonder if we're making the same mistakes today with our technological advancements.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Are we repeating history? Take artificial intelligence, for example. It has incredible potential to revolutionize countless industries and aspects of our lives. But there are also legitimate concerns about job displacement, algorithmic bias, and even the possibility of AI becoming uncontrollable.
Those are some serious considerations. It seems like every technological leap forward comes with a shadow side.
It does. And that's not to say that we should shy away from innovation or progress, but we need to approach these advancements with a healthy dose of caution and critical thinking.
So how can we learn from the past? How can we avoid repeating the mistakes of the horse manure crisis in the age of artificial intelligence automation? And who knows what else the future holds?
Well, I think the key takeaway here is that we need to be more proactive and thoughtful in our approach to technological development. We can't just blindly embrace every new invention without considering the potential consequences.
So it's about finding that balance between embracing innovation and being mindful of its potential downsides.
Exactly. We need to be asking ourselves tough questions. What are the long-term implications of this technology? How will it impact society? What safeguards do we need to put in place to mitigate potential risks?
It's about being responsible stewards of innovation. We can't just assume that technology will always lead to a better future. We have a role to play in shaping that future.
Absolutely. And I think that's one of the most important lessons we can learn from the horse manure crisis. It's a reminder that even the most well-intentioned solutions can have unintended consequences. But by understanding the past, we can make more informed decisions about the present and the future.
Well, that's certainly given me a lot to think about. It's amazing how a seemingly simple story about horse manure can lead to such profound insights about innovation progress and the choices we face as a society.
It's all interconnected, isn't it? The past, the present, the future. And sometimes looking back can help us see the path forward more clearly.
And on that note, we've reached the end of our deep dive into the great horse manure crisis. I hope you found it as fascinating and thought-provoking as I did.
Always a pleasure to delve into these unexpected corners of history.
A huge thank you to our listeners for joining us on this journey. And remember, the next time you're stuck in traffic, spare a thought for the horses who paved the way. And consider the innovations of today. That might shape the world of tomorrow.
Until next time, stay curious.
Until next time, don't just hear the world, listen to it.